Aristocracy. Today we shall place ourselves into the aristocratic position and see through its perspective. Most of us associate certain aristocracy with an economically and politically privileged class. The reason why we do this is because we have been experiencing a Marxoid school. We have been socialized in the leftist government education camps. The essence of the aristocratic worldview is a personality type and a Weltanschauung or worldview, and that is what we will try to study today. Political and economic privileges is a secondary issue in the definition of the aristocracy. Alternatively, it's actually a sign of degradation. All the elites have a rise and fall. Corruption was prevalent even among the European nobility. Human types. There are several ways to divide humanity into categories. Either one can see that everyone is unique, then you're a Stirnerist, referring to Max Stirner, or you can acknowledge that there exist various commonalities in which you belong to the same group, mankind. Both these divisions are so obvious that they are quite uninteresting and useless. All or nothing. An alternative way to classify them is to use a scale where they are better and worse. It is very anti-egalitarian, very taboo, and precisely because of that, quite rewarding. Our scale will start from the degree to which they are driven by animal impulses and the extent to which they are governed by their inner core. At the lower end of the scale, we find people completely controlled by their impulses, their chaotic emotional life and their impressions. These are lacking stability, lacking of a center, and are thrown around in the world by events in their environment. Our popular media seem determined to make them as numerous as possible. We have all met these people. Typical of them is that they have large debts because they've bought and borrowed too much. They have a wide range of relationships behind them as they become passionately in love in completely inappropriate people, which then degenerated in the form of jealousy and or adultery. They have many children and they do not always have a job. Some of them are violently obese because they eat what they want whenever they want it. Others drink when they want, how much they want. Some are in jail due to outbreaks of violence since they are not able to control themselves. Usually, they also shape and form their worldview based on soap operas. And so on and so forth. I think we all realize that this is not a life of dignity. These peoples have very little separates their lives from animals. And what separates them is not always for the better for the human. These are the ones that purely are but people. At the higher end of the scale, we find, however, people who have come to know and learned to control their emotions, their feelings, and their impulses. These are people who have an overview and ideals, which they live by, and having a contact, albeit often rudimentary, in our atheistic contemporary society with the unworldly. These are the ones who are more than people. Between these we have several middle stages. The anti-racist in their ethnic outfit with his hysterical outbreaks of discrimination is an example, where the boundary between the ideal, the chaotic, and confused emotional life is very vague. The professional criminal with his self-control, but extremely selfish and materialistic goals in life is another. The average Joe type who work hard without really knowing to what use is a third example. And the possessed xenophobic individual is a fourth. And by xenophobic, I mean about whatever it might be, whoever might expressing it, leftist or right-wingers. Remember, leftists wish to conserve and maintain their class revolution, their egalitarian society, etc., and fear change and revolt against it. We probably all agree that the higher end of the scale actually is qualitatively better than the lower. It is not a question whether they are different, but equal. But they are better or worse. The one who can restrain their emotions and not go around making out or go on shopping sprees live both a happier life and is a better dignified person than the one who is a mail ordering all he wants until the bailiff comes knocking on the door. Or how about the individuals who sleep in their own vomit after parties every weekend? Honesty, honor, courage, moderation, and ideals are better for us than gluttony, lust, laziness, cowardice, lies, self-deception, and perversion, which also is what the commandments esoterically are an expression of. Someone who lives according to the ideals previously mentioned we can call an aristocrat. From the Greek aristos, meaning the best, and aria, the noble, gentleman, a goth, god, or whatever we rather use based on our ideological and cultural residence. Social types. We probably agree on at this point that we would rather have an aristocrat as a leader than someone who is but a human. We are ashamed of our politicians when they are drinking until they pee down themselves or harass their colleagues sexually, and we become quite angry when their greed gets them to steal from us. We are probably also quite in an agreement, if you have listened this far, that we rather have a society of aristocrats than one of deceitfully kind, but dishonest and operational, as well as impulse-driven individuals. Such aristocratic societies have existed historically, where virtually all adults were living according to these ideals, both men and women, although in different ways. Our Old Norse ancestors, as well as Sparta, are clear examples. In contrast, our current society is scarcely populated by either the best, the noble, or Gotha, which is distressingly clear just going into a store, taking the subway, or sitting in a bus. How can it be that our society mass produces averages without self-discipline, while our ancestors' societies did not do it? The egalitarian ideology is a major villain in this drama, which is evident from the following excerpt from a review of a book on aristocratic philosophy. Quote, "What is an aristocracy?" The scholar Philippe Maret, in his essay on aristocracy and the meaning of class rule published in England in 1931, points out that it is an elite which, unlike a plutocracy, insists that its members should possess and exhibit excellence in the function of government itself. Aristocracy must stand for a higher type of man. A higher type of man. That is what those who seek the aristocratic society seek to arrive at, and this is truly Nietzschean as well, seeking the improvement of man, the transcendence of man, his overcoming of himself. For Dr. Jacob and the thinkers he discusses here, democracy is responsible for a radical shift in the opposite downward direction, away from the transcendence of man, and into the time of his great down-going, his degeneration, his return to the primitive state from which he once emerged, his loss of consciousness of his own will, and his submission of the will to the technical forces of a materialist elite. Aristocracy is raised on the irreplaceable values, as Dr. Jacob calls them, which universalist democracy is destroying: spiritual awareness, tradition, and race. Precisely those three values are being constantly weakened in the West. Dr. Jacob has provided a useful set of milestones, giving some of the names of thinkers who hoped that Western society would take the anti-democratic path. Gone from our world are the qualities which made an aristocracy possible. They are piety, wonder, and distance. When and how will they regain, if ever, their lost authority among us? Question mark. End quote. Elites rise and fall. Finally, a few words about the elites. Sometimes there is a distinction between elite and the égalité, which are not fully adequate. All societies are elitist in so that they have a governing elite. What differs is whether this is generally recognized and the ideals that govern this elite. Michel's iron law of oligarchy clearly demonstrates that elites always emerge in larger organizations. In Sweden, we have a ruling class, which in many ways can be called an elite, even if it uses a egalitarian ideology as part of their practices. However, it is a corrupt elite, both morally and economically. All elites are running the risk of falling, to forget the aristocratic ideals when it has offered access to luxury and power. Such is human nature. But the history of nature is that they have been replaced by a new elite who possess these ideals. Thus, our current political class, in the relatively short time, about 100 years, will be replaced by a new elite. The only question is what it will be, if there's any future in 100 years from now for the white man in the first place. I can only discern two environments in modern society where the fanaticism required for such a thing exists, and it is the right wing and Islamic. The question is therefore open to if it will be the Swedish flag or the crescent our future leaders will hoist after the replacement of power.